Hey y'all! In this video, we're gonna step way back to the basics, and I'm gonna cover a topic that I should have covered a long time ago, and that is vector creation and placement. We're going to get into placing vectors in a specific location on our material, and that'll include rectangles, circles, ovals, polylines, and I'll even play with a 3D model a little bit. Probably one of the more common questions I get is, how do I draw a line of a specific length from a specific point to a specific endpoint? And we'll get into that today. Let me go ahead and do a little bit of setup work here. If we look down here in this area, I have a piece of material that is 24 inches wide in X, 12 inches tall in Y, and the thickness of my material is 3/4 of an inch. Now, that doesn't really matter because we are not going to be calculating any tool paths. We're going to be working completely on the CAD side of the software this time. So what I want to do out here is divide this piece of material into 4 quadrants. Now we can see out here I have my XY datum set to the center. So this is X0, Y0. We'll start out by coming up here into the layer manager, and I want to make a total of 4 layers because I'm going to keep the vectors of each quadrant separate from one another so there's no confusion. So up here in my layer manager, I'll just add new layers until I have a total of 4. And all I'm doing is clicking add new layer. And when I get my 4th layer there, I'll click down here to set the names. Now you'll see layer 4, the text is bolder than the others. That indicates that's the active layer. I don't want that layer active just yet, so I'll go up here and click on the name layer 1. And we see layer 1 is listed up here in the layer manager. I'll click off to close my layer manager, and I now know that I'm working in layer 1. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to establish the 4 quadrants, and I'll do that by drawing a rectangle that represents each quadrant. So we'll go up here under Create Vectors to draw a rectangle, and I want my first quadrant to be here on the upper left. This is going to be a good exercise in the Cartesian coordinate system when we get a little bit further into it. But for right now, what I need to remember is my anchor point and my X0, Y0. This is what I mean when I say in my videos that I'm going to put my XY datum in the center for layout purposes. It's easier for me to think in terms of 0, 0 in the center than it is to try to compensate for a 0, 0 down here. So I've got the anchor point set for X0, Y0, but I want to anchor this rectangle right down here. That is the lower right corner. So if I set the anchor point for the lower right, X0, Y0, it's going to start that rectangle right here and go back this way. I want my width to be 12 inches because that's half of my material width in X. I want my height to be 6 inches because that's half of my material height in Y. And I'll click Create. And there is my first rectangle on layer 1. Now I can close this, come up to my layer manager, and I want to select layer 2 because that's the layer I want active right now. That's the one I want to work in over here. And I'll turn off layer 1 by clicking on that light bulb. My rectangle goes away, and this tells me I'm working in layer 2 now. I'll click off somewhere down here on the material, and now let's draw a rectangle that represents this quadrant. Go back into Draw Rectangle. And none of this down here is going to change. Neither is my X and Y position. The only thing that's going to change is the anchor point. I want to anchor the bottom left corner at 0, 0. We'll click Create, and there's that rectangle. Now I'll do the same for these two down here. Close this, go up to my Layer Manager, click on Layer 3, turn off, Layer 2, click off, go back into Draw a Rectangle, change my anchor point, create, close, Layer 4, turn off Layer 3, click off, Draw a Rectangle, change my anchor point, create. That creates all 4 quadrants of my piece of material. I can come back up here, turn on each of these layers, and there are my 4 quadrants. I have a rectangle here, 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 and here. One of the reasons for placing them on separate layers is if I should need to select this rectangle, if I select this, I've selected both of these. If I just want to select this rectangle, sure, I could come out here and select this rectangle only. But if I want to eliminate confusion, I will just turn off the other layers, make sure this is my active layer, and go to work there. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I want to work in this quadrant right here. So that's layer 1. I'll select it to make it the active layer, and I'll turn off the other 3. So now I'm just working here. I can still place any vectors out here, but they will be on layer 1. Let's start by placing a circle out here in this quadrant. Now, when it comes to creating a circle, you're fairly limited in your choices. Now, you can place the circle wherever you'd like, but the circle is always going to be drawn based on the center point of that circle. And you can work with a radius, meaning from the center of that circle out, or you can work with a diameter, meaning from one side of the circle to the opposite side of the circle across the center. So if I want to place a circle down here in the center of this quadrant, I can do that. I know that that's going to be somewhere in X of around 6, because that's half of the width of that rectangle. And I know it's going to be placed somewhere right around 3. Now, if you see my cursor snap to the center of that rectangle, and I have an X position of -6 and a Y position +3. That is something to keep in mind. We're dealing with the Cartesian coordinate system. Everything to the left of x0 is negative. Everything to the right is positive. Everything above 0 in y is positive. Everything below 0 in y is negative. If you look at my cursor, it's giving me clues. It's showing me the x and y position. And if I get to the center of this rectangle, it's showing me -6 in x, +3 in y. And that comes in handy. If I want this 2-inch diameter circle right here, I can just click and there it is. And the center point changes to reflect that. It's at -6, +3. Now, let me undo that by holding down Control and tapping the letter Z. Let's say I don't want it in the center. I want it off to the left a little bit and up above somewhat. If I know that coordinate, I can just type it in up here, click Create, and it'll put that circle right there where I want it. But by putting my cursor out here a little bit, this is giving me some clues. I know that my x is going to be negative. So if I wanted at -8 in x, +4 in y, I can come up here and I can go -8.0, 4.0, negative, positive, 2-inch diameter, create. And that puts that center point of that circle right there at -8 in x, +4 in y. I can close this. It is similar for a polygon or a star. The only difference will be the number of sides, obviously, that you're using, and the dimensions of your star. The placement will be the same. The center point, wherever you choose to put it within your quadrant or on your material. So that's a fairly simple vector like a circle, star, or polygon. Let's go over to this quadrant and let's insert some text. And I'm going to show you two different ways of doing this. So let's go up here and change my layer. I want to work in layer 2, so I'll turn it on, click on it to make it active, then I'll turn off layer 1 to hide these vectors over here. Now there are two ways of creating text over here, and I'll show you the easy way first. And the easy way is to select the vector object that we want to create our text in. Then we'll come over here to draw text within a vector box. And I'll click on that, give it a second to load all of my fonts. And I'm going to just accept whatever is down here, whatever font is here. I'm going to just type in my name. Now, when I typed in my name, it automatically sized the characters and placed them within the center of my vector object. So I don't have a heck of a lot of control of the text size within that vector object. We do know it's going to place it right in the middle because I have it set to align to the center. That's all well and good if I want that text that size. Now, yes, I can hold down Shift, and because I'm in Move and Transform mode, I can hold Shift to lock it in the center, and I can reduce or increase the size. And that may work for me. That may be just fine. I can also come over here and change the bounding box dimensions. This does not change. It does change the text, but it doesn't change the text based on text height. It does it based on the size of my rectangle. So if I change this to 4 and this to 10, it reduces the size of my rectangle as well. Now, if I have other things going on out here, I may not want that. So it's easier to place the text in the center of your bounding box of your vector by using draw text within a vector object. But you have a little bit less control of the size of the text if that's what you're aiming for. Now let me go ahead and hold down Control, tap the letter Z. It undoes that first change. I'll tap it again and keep going until my text is gone. Another way of doing this that gives you more control over text size is to come over to Draw Text, just standard. I'll click on that, let it load my fonts. It appears it's the same font down here. Now here we have a little bit different situation. We have the text box over here. I'll go ahead and I'll enter my text. And it wrote out my text down here based on where the anchor point of that text box is. The anchor point is this blue square right here. That's where the text is going to be anchored. I have my alignment set to the center, so that doesn't necessarily mean the center of a character is going to be right here. It means the center of the text overall is going to be right here. Well, I don't want this anchor point to be down here at x4, y1. I want the center of my text to be up here in the center of this rectangle. Now, I can try to figure out where that would be. See, for here, the center point, it would be x6. And you see how the text moved over. And here it would be y3, but that doesn't place the text in the center. It places the anchor point in the center. You can see up here by this white square, that's the center of my text. This is akin to when you were learning how to write in elementary school. You had the paper with all of the lines on it that you had to follow and put your text in between the lines. Well, imagine that bottom line on that sheet of paper. That's what this anchor point is. So it's placing the bottom of your text on this anchor point. You'll see a lot of people, me included, not even worry about that. We'll just create our text to the height we want. Let's say I want this 3 inches high. And that adjusted that. And that's fine. We'll close that. Then we'll align the text. We'll either go into Move and Transform mode to move it around, or we can align the text by selecting it, hold down Shift, select the vector object, in this case the rectangle, come over here to Align, and we want to align to selection, not the material. We want to align the selected object, the text, to the last item in the selection, the rectangle. So I selected the text first, then the rectangle. So the software knows to align this to that. And I'll come down here and I'll align it to the center vertically and horizontally, and that puts the center of my text within the center of my rectangle. So, we close this, and that is how you place, size, and align text. 2 different methods based on the look that you're going for. So now let's move down to this quadrant down here. So again, I'll come up to my Layer Manager, I'll turn on Layer 3, select it to be the active layer, shut off Layer 2, and down here, I want to do a little bit of 3D modeling. So we'll click off to turn off my Layer Manager, or close my Layer Manager rather. And I'll come down here to the Clipart library. And let's go into Clipart and go to Domes and Dishes. And I want to put one of these 90-degree domes in the center over here. When it comes to the placement of a 3D model, there are 2 ways of putting a model out on the material. And that's what we need to do first. We need to get a model out here, then we can place it. Because there's only 2 ways of placing a 3D model, taking it out of the Clipart library and putting it in the model. Now in the past, you've seen me just double-click on the icon over here, which imports that model into the center of the material. The other way to do it is to just come over to the icon here, click, and drag into your workspace out here. Now I can come over to my Modeling tab, and I can place and size the model. So, what I'll do right now is I want to size it. If I want to take this round dome and make it into an oval, I can do that here in my set object size. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to anchor the model from the center. I want the center of the model to be my anchor point. I'm going to uncheck link XY because I'm going to have a different width than length here. I want my width to be 10 inches wide, but I only want my height to be 4 inches tall. And if I had link XY, I would not be able to do that. So by unchecking link XY, I can control these two separately. I'll click apply, and that changed my circle into an oval. So that has my size created. I can close this. Now I need to put this in the center of this quadrant. Now I can do that again by using the alignment. I can select this and hold down Shift, select the rectangle, come up here and align it using these tools. But there's also another way I can do that. I can use the Move command. The Move is over here under Transform Objects. So I'll click on that, and I want to move the center of my oval dome here to an absolute X and Y position. Now I know I want it at X 6.0, Y -3. So I can do that here. This position right now reflects where it's sitting right now. So it's fairly close, but it's not spot on. I'll come over here and go 6.0 because it's 6 inches to the left of my X0, and I'll go -3.0 because I want it 3 inches below my Y0. Click apply, and it moves that oval. Close. Now, there was something else worth seeing here. If I go back over here to move, I can move the model relative to where it's sitting right now. If I want to move it up a ½ inch, I would come up here to Y position, and I want to move it up, so that's a positive move. I would go 0.5, which is ½ inch above its current position. Click apply. If I decided later, no, that was a mistake, I can either hold down Control and tap the letter Z to undo that change, or I can change my Y position relative to -0.5, apply, and it moves back down that ½ inch. That's if I want to move it relative to its current position. If I decide I need to move it to a different location in absolute coordinates, I can change over to absolute and my anchor point becomes active. I can decide that I want to put this corner as represented by this white diamond. I could put this corner on the center point. I'll change my anchor point to that corner and set that at X6, Y -3. Click apply, and this corner is now at the center point of my quadrant. If I decide that was an error, I can come back, select the center, and go 6.0, -3.0, click apply, and that moves the center back down to the center of my quadrant. So by varying the anchor point, you can change the position from one known location to another in absolute coordinates or relative to its current position. But all relative moves are based on the center point. For our final quadrant down here, I'm going to go ahead and get into the most, I hesitate to say complex, but it is the most convoluted of all. And that is over here in the Drawing tab, the Draw a Polyline. So to get started, we'll go ahead and we'll turn on Layer 4. I'll select it as my active layer, shut off Layer 3, and come down here. Now, I'm going to select the vector, and I'm going to zoom the active view to the selected object, and that puts this vector right in the center of our screen. So I click off now, and we'll go into Draw a Polyline. Now, when most folks see this form, they're immediately confused, and for good reason. We have a lot of blanks here. If you look at my cursor out here on the material, you'll see that I have an X display and a Y display. This is what I mean when I say the software is already giving us visual clues and hints. If you also look over here, down in this portion of the screen, we have a display of the cursor position. We'll be using both that cursor position over here as well as the cursor position on my cursor itself. When you first come into the Create a Line or Polyline tool, what it's asking you is for the start point of your line. If you know where that start point is, you would enter the X coordinate here and the Y coordinate here. Again, because we're working to the left of our X0 line and below our Y0 line, both of these coordinates are going to be negative. And if we look over here at our cursor position, it's telling us that. Wherever I put this cursor, it's going to be negative by working down in this bottom quadrant. If you saw my video on CNC for Beginners, what is a vector? You know that a vector needs three things. It needs a start point, it needs a direction, and it either needs a length or an end point. The length will determine that end point, or the end point will determine the length. I know that sounds confusing, but you'll see what I mean in just a second. So what it's asking you here is, where are we putting in the start point? I know it says next point, but because we don't have a point out here now, this will be the start point. Now, if we know that we want our line to start up in here somewhere, we want it to be at X negative 10, Y negative 1. That's what we'll enter over here. We'll put negative 10 and negative 1. Then we'll come down here and we'll click Add. Now it doesn't look like anything has happened because it's taking my current cursor position, and my cursor's over here off of the material. But if we bring the cursor back out here, we can see now we have a line anchored at that position. X negative 10, Y negative 1. I'm looking down here. Now, what it's asking us for is the next point. Where do we want that next point to be? Do we want it over here, down here, up here? Where do we want it? Now, if we know we want it to come straight over this direction, 6 inches, look at my cursor. L stands for length. A stands for angle. When I move this cursor around, they change. Right now, I've got a length of 4.95 and an angle. Look over at my cursor position in the form. The angle is negative 5.3. If I come up here, we're positive 3.3 on my angle. So if I know I want a straight line out this way that's 4 inches long, come over here and I'll click on angle, 0.0, and a length of 4 inches. And I will add that point. And you saw the line suddenly appear. Now, I have a choice to make. If I'm going to continue the line, I'll move on to my next point. If that's the line that I want, I'll just hit the space bar to finish that line. I now have a 4-inch long line starting at x, negative x10, negative 1y, and ending at negative 6x and negative 1y. That's put the line of a known length in a known position. What I need to know is, where do I want that line to start, what angle or direction, and a length or a location of that end point. To demonstrate what I mean by that is, here we went with an angle and a length. Let's start another one down here an inch below. So that will be negative 10x, but we'll go negative 2 in y, add that, and that puts our start point down here. Now if I know I want to go to negative 6x, negative 2y, that's what I'll put up here. Negative 6, and I can leave negative 2y because that's not going to change. And I'll click add, and that drew that line from negative 10x to negative 6x. Both the start point and the end point are at negative 2y. And I'll click on spacebar to finish that line. So you can either enter your start point, then use a length and an angle, or you can enter a start point and a stop point, and it will figure out the angle and the length on its own. Let's do that one more time. We're going to start a new line, so the first thing we need is the start point, and we want it down here. So we'll go with our x, negative 10, and y will make negative 3. We'll add that start point, and that puts our start point down here. Well, now we don't want to go into a straight line. We want to bring it down to an angle. And let's say we want that angle to be 25 degrees. I can try to drag it down here and get on 25 degrees exactly, or I can look over here at my cursor position, and I can see that I'm looking at a negative angle. I want it to be 4 inches long. So I'm going to take the angle, negative 25, and a length of 4. I'll come up here, angle, negative 25.0 degrees, and a length 4 inches. And I'll click add, and there is that line. Now I can press the space bar, or I can continue the line back up this way. If I want to go with a positive 25 degree angle, look at my cursor position over here. I want to bring this back up to make a V. So I would want a positive 25 with a 4-inch length. So I would come up here, and all I need to do in this case is move my cursor over here and get rid of that negative. So I've got a positive 25 degree angle, 4-inch length, click add, and that adds the next point in the line. Now I can hit my space bar to finish that line. If I close this, select it, it is all one vector. That's the difference between a line and a polyline. A line has a start point and an end point. A polyline has another point somewhere along its span. If I select it, go into node editing, I can see here is my start point. It was drawn in this direction as indicated by this arrow to this point, and then back up to this point, which is my end point. Type N to come out of node editing. So, it's not as complex as you would think when you learn the basic steps. When you first enter the form, it's asking you where your start point will be in an XY coordinate. You enter the coordinate, click Add. For your next point, it wants either an angle and a length or another coordinate. Click Add, and it adds that next point. And you can continue adding points or tap spacebar to finish the current line and move on. I hope that answers your questions on creating a line in a known coordinate of a known length at a known angle. So, we'll go ahead and wrap up this video now. I hope that answers your questions on placing various vector objects, putting them in known locations, creating known sizes, and helps you to understand a little bit more about the Cartesian coordinate system, knowing where you are on the workpiece and using the visual cues built into the software that will help you out as far as locating that specific area. Remember as well that down here on the bottom of the screen, you have an X and Y readout. Everywhere the tip of my cursor arrow goes, that's what that readout is following. So over here you can see to the right of my X0, I'm in negative X. Above my Y0, I'm in positive Y. Negative X, negative Y. Positive X, negative Y. Positive X, positive Y. It's using visual cues like those and the ones built into the various drawing tools that will help you get that location right the first time. So I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, I do hope you'll give me a thumbs up. And I'd like to remind you that this afternoon at 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be hosting a live Q&A session where we can discuss everything that I've presented in this video. Again, that'll be 12 noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time, right here on my YouTube channel. And I'll put a link to that live Q&A session down in the description box of this video. We have a lot of fun in these live Q&A sessions, and there's a good group of people that tunes in for them. So I hope you'll join us. They're also a great reason to go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. And when you subscribe to my channel, hit that little bell button right next to that red subscribe button. Then click it again and set that to all notifications. Then you'll get a notification every time I post a video and every time I go live. So, I hope to see you this afternoon for the live Q&A session. And as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and y'all take care.